We may here observe how prone men are to abuse, to their own destruction, those external advantages which God bestows on them. God had separated the Jews from the Gentiles to manifest himself unto them, and by doing so he had exalted them above the rest of the world, to whom he had not vouchsafed the same favor. The proper and legitimate use of this superiority would have been to distinguish themselves from the Gentiles by a holy life. But instead of this, owing to a fatal confidence which they placed in this advantage, they committed the same sins as the Gentiles and plunged into the same excesses. By this means, what they considered as an advantage became a snare to them, for wherein they judged others, they condemned themselves. We may likewise remark how much self-love blinds and betrays men into false judgments. When all the question was respecting the Gentiles, the Jews judged correctly and conformably to divine justice. But when the question is respecting themselves, although they were equal in guilt, they would not admit that they were equally the subjects of condemnation. Verse 4, Or despisest thou the riches of his goodness, and forbearance, and long-suffering, not knowing that the goodness of God leadeth thee to repentance? Goodness. This is the best translation of the word. Mr. Tholick says that it signifies love in general, but the idea expressed is more general than love. An object of goodness may be very unworthy of being an object of love. A distinction must be made between goodness, forbearance, and long-suffering. Goodness imports the benefits which God hath bestowed on the Jews. Forbearance denotes God's bearing with them without immediately executing vengeance, his delaying to punish them. It signifies the toleration which he had exercised toward them after extending to them his goodness, so that this term implies their ingratitude after having received the benefits which God had bestowed, notwithstanding which he had continued the course of his goodness. Long-suffering signifies the extent of that forbearance during many ages, denoting a degree of patience still unexhausted. Their sins were not immediately visited with the divine displeasure, as would be the case in the government of men. This term goodness respects their first calling, which was purely gratuitous, Deuteronomy 7:7. Forbearance respects what had passed after their calling, when, on different occasions, the people having offended God, he had, notwithstanding, restrained his wrath, and had not consumed them. It is this that David celebrates in Psalm 103, verse 10, and 106. Long-suffering adds something more to forbearance, for it respects a long course of ingratitude and sins on the part of that people, and imports an extreme degree of patience on the part of God, a patience which many ages and a vast accumulation of offenses had not exhausted. The apostle calls all this the riches of his goodness and long-suffering and forbearance, to mark the greatness of their extent, their value and abundance, and to excite admiration in beholding a God all-powerful, who has no need of any of his creatures, and is infinitely exalted above them, striving for so long a period with an unrighteous, ungrateful, rebellious, and stiff-necked people, but striving with them by his goodness and patience. This language is also introduced to correct the false judgments of men on this patience of God, for they are apt on this account to imagine that there is no God. If they say God existed, he would not endure the wicked. They suppose that God does not exercise his providence in the government of the world, since he does not immediately punish their sins. To repress these impious thoughts, the apostle holds forth the manner of God's procedure as the riches of goodness and patience, in order that the impunity which it appears that sinners enjoy might not be attributed to any wrong principle.